Tonight on the podcast, Flying Cat Marketing with Bucket Hat Edition. Everyone's wearing bucket hats. Why? I don't know. We like them.
Hello there. Welcome back to the Flying Cat Marketing interview series. I'm Maiva Cifuentes, and today, for those of you who are watching, you are watching the bucket hat episode. And I have today my guest, Nigel Stevens.
I knew that was gonna happen. Like, there's no way you're gonna. There's no way you're gonna say my name with a straight face after.
Okay, wait. This is getting difficult. Okay. It's just your name, really. I have to say it.
Just a name. There's nothing funny about it. There's nothing funny about it. Just a name.
Okay. It's good to get some practice anyway. Okay, ready? Trying again, third time. Number 3, take 3. Hello, welcome to the Flying Cat Marketing interview series, special bucket hat episode, where the two of us are wearing bucket hats. If you're just listening, unfortunately, you get to miss the fun. But you still get to hear the insights of my wonderful guest here, Nigel Stevens, who is the founder of OGM, Organic Growth Marketing, which is an SEO agency that has worked with some pretty high growth startups, and I'm excited to have you here today.
Thanks, Maiva.
So we were just talking before about a lot of interesting topics that I think that we could continue that conversation now. But first, how the heck are you?
Pretty good. Even though there was like low grade hurricane winds like 4 hours ago.
Yeah, we almost canceled this episode because earlier this morning, for those of you who can see, we have Buddy the Flying Cat, who's very interested in being a part of this episode. Before there was very strong wind and rain, we almost canceled, but then it became sunny, so I'm happy that we can
Indeed
have this episode. So we were talking about what I had called internal marketing, but actually I find it pretty interesting because it's not just, we were talking about hiring and like saying this is how we see SEO, for example, to your new hires, but it's also getting them to adopt and embody that for when you all go together as a team to present it to another company that you're working with, right?
Yeah, I mean, if I had to synthesize down the concept that we were talking about, it's basically that it doesn't matter how good you know something should be done or how to do it or whatever. In basically any company, you're going to need buy-in from different people. And if you don't get them to, at minimum, buy in, but ideally sort of be excited about it and understand how it's going to forward their goals, then it's not going to go anywhere. And that's especially important for something like SEO and content that's really touching on different parts of a business, different parts of operations to actually bring it to life, as I'm sure you've experienced.
Yeah, I found something that you said before interesting because you mentioned that if you have a meeting about SEO or brain dumping keywords, for example, but if you have somebody from SEM, from content, or from other areas that I would see as other marketing departments that I might think might be important to be in that meeting, why is that already a bad start for a meeting?
Well, it's not that it necessarily has to be a bad start. It's that practically functionally speaking, it probably will be. Like the sort of classic thing of, let's get a meeting together with not much of an agenda other than let's have good ideas.
Yeah.
And I'd much rather sort of go in with something like, here's what we're trying to accomplish, and or try to generally steer the ship. So in that example, what I was saying is we put together a deck basically explaining, here's the vision we have for how we're all going to work together and how it matters for you and how we're trying to help you, but then also tell us if you think that makes sense, which is probably a key part that I had to think through to actually implement, because it's very, I think everyone's instinct is just say, here's how we see the world and here's how we want to do things. Listen to my grand ideas, but it doesn't work like that.
It's kind of a careful balance that you need to have as an agency owner or outsourcer, contractor, whatever, because people are hiring us because we're the experts and we can lead them and tell them this is what we need to do. But then, of course, they know the market, they know their product. So how do you find that balance?
Yeah, there's also another interesting aspect to that. Like, you probably get this question, right, where someone says, is X or Y or Z good for SEO or bad for SEO? Or is this good or bad for SEO? And it's easy to sort of just give a lazy answer to that question, which is to answer it directly. When in reality, I think about the answer to that question, like I heard nutrition phrase before, where there's no such thing as good foods or bad foods. There's just every food has pros and cons. If all you ate was kale for the rest of your life, you probably wouldn't be very healthy. But if you eat kale with other stuff, whatever, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So how are you onboarding your new team? You were telling me about a new process that you have now, doing this kind of internal marketing to them.
I'm really putting it on the spot. I hope we actually have our stuff together.
I'm interested because I'm building the team as well right now.
Yeah. So one of the things I realized is that even like we wanted to show people how to do tactical things. Like for example, here's how to do keyword research. Here's how to optimize a page. Here's how, if you're working on building links, here's how you do that, whatever. But if you don't actually understand what it's working towards and what the underlying vision and methodology is, then it's kind of for naught. And especially in an area like SEO, where I think honestly there's a lot of bad information, there's a lot of myths, and the way a lot of people do things is counterproductive or inefficient. You basically have to like start from scratch and say like, no, here's how we have to think about it from the ground up. Here's what isn't true, and here's the foundational principles that are guiding it. And we just put together some decks that we walked through on like Loom or Cloud App or whatever with videos. And then we had some questions after to make it kind of interactive, and then we talk about it to basically see like, does this make sense? Do you think we're missing anything? And what part of this does or does not resonate?
How many people do you guys have on your team now?
8, including me, I believe. Yeah.
Okay. And what does that entail? How many people? What roles are there?
One is ops and just sort of making sure things get done, especially me, because I'm good at coming up with ideas, not as good at actually making those ideas happen from start to finish, so I need some accountability. I have one guy is basically, I would call it R&D. He's working on some internal database stuff and product and tooling, and we're sort of in the earlier stages of that. And then a few people that sort of support all of the clients we have, and then 2 people, hopefully soon to be 3, that basically own the relationships. And that's like driving the strategy, owning the day-to-day, and then they get help from stuff on the layer below.
Okay, so when you say that there are people who are supporting the clients, but then there are people who are owning the relationships, how's that different?
So it means like internal versus external. So, but I think with a lot of sort of agency models is you have the, like, I actually hate the term account manager. I haven't come up with a better one, but I hate it because the implication for me is you just have to like take people out to dinner and send them emails and flowers and like make sure they keep paying bills. And I think that's why a lot of service organizations are so inefficient and don't do good work, because you sort of segment all the different aspects of getting stuff done to the point that like people are only delivering partial value. So someone is who sort of owns the strategy and owns the client relationship, they're basically like the person who's ultimately accountable for it. But then we have internal systems and processes to support that. So like, okay, we want to break into this new topical area. They'll get help from one of the manager levels, the one below, to sort of do some of the research and put together like a V1 of the strategy. And then they'll sort of fill in the gaps and provide any input, that sort of thing.
So when you guys have all your processes, and you do work with some pretty big companies, right? That they probably have a lot of their own processes going and a lot of different stakeholders involved. How do you, when you approach them and recommend them, this is the best way that we can build a relationship together, what does that look like?
Well, one thing I learned the hard way is that you're not going to make people do things on your terms. And the bigger the company, the more they have a way of doing things. So try to get a whole bunch of moving pieces to do things on your terms is ridiculous. So one thing we learned early on is like there's sort of an adaptive part of our process where we go into their project management tool. So like if they use Asana, then oftentimes we'll sort of help them set it up, because they may not have they may be sort of doing stuff ad hoc and not have a super buttoned down workflow. So we'll help them set up a workflow in Asana. And if they have it, then we just fit into that. And then on our side, we manage stuff in our own project management tool. And even though there ends up being a little bit of double work, I think it's worth it, because ultimately if you want to deliver value and peace of mind to someone, then making them have to check something else, or it's like they just want it where they want it, and you fit into that.
Yeah. That was everybody participating, and I agree with what he said. No, it's interesting that you say that, because I also find that to be a struggle because sometimes client processes are non-existent or super manual, the solutions that they come up with. And I kind of just want to get them into our systems, which are efficient. A lot of it is automated. There's just things that get moving with it without adding all these manual steps. But like you said, they have a lot of other concerns. They have a lot of other responsibilities, and they also hired us to just kind of take care of this. Mm-hmm. So for me, I find it challenging to find that balance. And I haven't yet thought of it as a solution to actually go into their project management tools.
Yeah, I mean, there's no great answer. I feel like with sort of tooling, and especially with everybody going remote, everyone's looking for like this magic bullet of a tool that fixes everything. It's going to suck in some way. It's just, how do you want it to suck? And the trade-off I've made is I want it to suck where we have to manage our own workflow in the back end that fits with the way we do it, and that's standardized. And then we have to make sure we manage the client-facing one. That comes with its own amount of suckage. But I think that's a good trade-off, because ultimately it means that like it's our job to make things easier for them, and that's what we're doing, at least in theory, I hope.
Yeah. So I know that you do a lot of kind of vetting clients to make sure that they're right to work with you. Well, vetting, but you were explaining earlier, and you've told me this many times before, that you kind of try to convince them not to work with OGM to see how dedicated they are to doing it. How did you learn the lessons to do that? Because I know that came from mistakes made. So what happened?
Well, I mean, I think the worst thing, like I'm not good, I don't do enough marketing for myself. This is something I need to correct for. But ultimately, the way my business has grown so far is do good work, get results, they tell other people, and then that just happens. What's up, buddy?
So what was those lessons that you learned that made you add this process to hiring?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple. One is that I've tried to align the incentives around the business around client incentives, which is that like we really only want to take on projects that will succeed, because that ends up being our marketing. And the other thing is that if you don't properly vet clients, aside from the fact of the results, then there's just going to be some pain, because you end up having to either do something that you originally didn't set out to do, or you have to basically suffer the results of not doing that, and that is really suboptimal. So I can remember one client early on a few years ago where I just sort of signed up for stuff out of ignorance and like excitement to just do a project. I was like, oh sure, yeah, find writers, yeah, we can do that. Something else, yeah, upload the stuff, yeah, we can do that. And then after doing that for a couple months, I was like, this sucks. I don't want to do it anymore. But I was like, man, like, isn't this just the expectation to do it? But then this weird thing happened where I realized that I could just set the expectations. When I talked to someone else, I said, here's the way it works. Like, here's what we do, here's what we don't do. And then if they ask questions about it, just explain, here's the reason why. We focus on what we do well here, and ultimately you need to have your own operations so that you can carry out this part and then we can scale it. And then if they don't agree with that, then I found that that's fine. There's not a right or wrong answer. It's just not the best fit for us. And if they do agree with it, then up front, we've set the expectation. And then I think the other part is just making sure that the goals and expectations are aligned. Like if someone says, for a B2B business with a long sales cycle, is this going to be driving revenue next month? It's not that it won't be driving revenue next month. It's just a very strong leading indicator that the expectations are not aligned.
Yeah. So what are the key things that you think would be successful between a company, a growth stage company working with, I guess I can't say an agency general, but are there anything that is kind of universal to outsourcing marketing to agencies?
Yeah, I think having a clear division of labor of who does what, and I can't say for sure what the normal problems are because I just focus on our own situation, but what I actually do is for all the major workflows, I put together what I call a joint accountabilities doc, and there's like 5 workflows and then us and you. And in each one I say, here's what we're doing, here's what you're doing, and then I go through that with them to basically get them to poke holes and ask questions so that up front, that's super established. So I think that right there gets you a lot of the way.
Have you ever gotten to that point and they're like, oh, wait, we didn't want to do anything?
Yeah, probably. And like I've honestly gotten to the point that I don't mind. And I find that if it's ever a point where I really feel tempted to say yes to things that I shouldn't, then that's when mistakes happen. So I try to go in with the expectation of like I actually want to convince you that this isn't worth it and that here's all the reasons this wouldn't work. And then if you get over that hump, then there's clearly buy-in and alignment.
So what are you guys up to now? I mean, what's OGM doing?
What are we doing? We're sitting around doing podcasts, talking about what we'd like to be doing now. Yeah, I mean, working with some cool companies like Intercom, Segment, been working with Hotjar for a while. And internally, one thing I'm trying to really push is not getting comfortable with things.
Okay.
So I think something that's very easy to do is you get defensive of the way you do things and your view of the world, which prevents you from evolving that, especially with SEO and content. You know, there's sort of like a new platitude every other day about here's the thing that matters or user intent this or blah blah. So one thing I try to do is basically question even things that we've decreed as like important or things we believe to try to poke holes in it. And I find that to be fun, and then it also helps us, I think and hope, be sort of on the forefront of trying to advance this stuff past monotonous copycatting.
Do you have any kind of process for going back and testing your ideas? Or you just test it on new projects?
Yeah, well, I mean, we it's more like we have processes, and then when we sort of have a new hypothesis, we might test it out. Like on the thing you and I work together on, what if we change the way we do content briefs? And there's some aspects of that worked, some that didn't, and that we learned from. But just by sort of questioning a very basic aspect of what we do, we were able to do something that I think in some ways like delivered more value.
And so in that project, there's a lot of people involved, and it was basically that the content writer turned into the content manager, basically, right? And how are you supporting them to kind of? I'm trying to get an idea of basically what the relationship looks like and how they are getting wins from the way that they're working with an agency.
One thing, sort of like an aha moment for me, not early on enough, but like at least like a little while ago with this kind of work, is that you sort of think that your deliverables are like, oh, we have to deliver this sheet or these briefs, or even with results like this traffic or whatever, these conversions. What you're ultimately selling is peace of mind, and that's what you're selling in every transaction. It's peace of mind. Like if I buy a more expensive sweater than a cheaper one, I'm basically saying, okay, like I'm not gonna have to worry about this for a while. This is gonna last.
Yeah.
Whatever. So sort of trying to identify up front what are the elements of peace of mind that someone needs to like feel that, okay, I don't have to worry about this. This is good, with like your sort of senior stakeholder, the one who brings you in, and then the one we're working with on a day-to-day, like what do we need to do to make sure that they just have peace of mind, that they know everything is doing. And with some people, that's operations. It's like supporting them in a bunch of direct things. And with other people, is just being proactive about finding opportunities, whatever. With other people, it's like, make sure you give me the stuff so I can show my superiors that we're doing the right thing. And sort of identifying that with every stakeholder.
Yeah, I have found that in the same way. I have also found in a couple of my clients that they're really motivated, really passionate, but they're CEOs. They're the ones who want to be the direct contact with me, and then they just disappear. Have you had this experience?
Oh yeah, I've learned from that one. And now because a lot of the time I get brought in by like the CEO or somebody senior, and then they say, how is this going to work? And that's why one of the expectations I set up front is you have to have a day-to-day person. And even if they say like, well, we kind of want to be involved and make sure, I'll say, look, like you're the CEO. If we're waiting on you to get this stuff done, it's probably not going to get done. And it means that like we don't even have the basic foundation for something scalable. So if we're at the point where that's the way you think it needs to go, then we're probably not the best people to work with. And I'm not saying you're wrong, but you want to get this off the ground and be more involved, and then get to a point where you could hand it off to somebody else. So I think so much of it just comes down to expectation setting, and as the expert, quote unquote, telling them, here's how we think it should work, here's why, and we've learned this by doing it a bunch of times.
So have they actually gone when you told them that and hired a person to be the day-to-day with you?
Yep, I've seen that happen, and or sort of move team people around. Like at one point, one company we were working with, he said, "Yeah, like I think I could be the point of contact." And I said, "Look, we really think we should have an operational person to drive things." And then I think what was her role? It was like she was actually on the ops team, so it was a different thing. But she was a good point of contact, and she got stuff done.
Cool. I'm like taking in all of this information because I feel like it's a lot that I could learn from as well, and probably a lot from, I guess the people who are listening or watching to this aren't from the agency side, but I think that it's something that they could definitely learn from the business side. For example, like you had mentioned before, where people try things a certain way, or they take on a new agency, there's nobody to help them implement, they don't get results from it, and then they say this just doesn't work. But I think that kind of laying out this is the best way to create relationships that are going to be win-win. It's pretty interesting because it's not done for you, it's done with you.
Yeah. And I mean, especially with something that's very cross-functionally dependent, like SEO. Like SEO is really the sum of there's somebody needs to create content, someone needs to create visuals. The content has to roll up into product messaging. It has to roll up into company messaging. There might be legal stuff involved. But what often happens is those considerations aren't taken into account at the beginning. Mm-hmm. It's someone whose objective is to increase some number. And because they see it as a silo of, here's this number, maybe it's like organic revenue or leads or something, then they say, okay, this team, this person, this company, whatever, they can help us drive up this number, bring them in, okay, just make sure details, whatever, let's go. And they don't actually get that, they don't understand what it takes to get the work done from the beginning. And then even if they try to sort of force it on other people, like I don't think people have bad intentions, they don't help you do things. They just have a lot of stuff going on. They have their own deliverables, their own KPIs. And especially when you're an outside agency, if you just show up and you say, hey, here's this thing we're working on, help us, and you don't help them understand it, and you don't help them understand how you're trying to help them and help the greater picture, then a very lazy thing to do as an agency is like to do a bunch of work and then say, oh, they didn't implement it, they suck, and not take responsibility for like, why did they not do it? Yeah. What could you have done up front? What could you have done during the process to get other people involved?
Yeah, that's super important. Ownership.
Mm-hmm.
I love that you say that. It's music to my ears. And I remember actually you saying before that for some beginning companies or companies that aren't really mature enough yet, that actually SEO isn't, we're kind of moving the conversation here, but something that you said earlier did remind me of that, but that they shouldn't be doing SEO.
Yeah, so because SEO is the sum of a lot of parts, if like with a lot of marketing channels, it depends where you are in your product and company development cycle. So especially if you're pre-product market fit, like you're trying to figure out who's our customer, what do they want, how do we compare to other people, SEO is a terrible channel because it's a slow feedback loop to get started. Yeah. And if there's like a power law, or what would the mathematical term be? My English degree is showing itself here. It's logarithmic, where like the more authority and like the more links you get, the more authority you get, the more people search for you, the easier and easier and easier it gets to rank for stuff. So why would you start doing this stuff here when you have to do a bunch of other things to survive? Now, this can be a controversial statement because a lot of people say you have to do SEO from the beginning, but it depends how you think about it. Like there's certain aspects of SEO. Make sure people can find you who are looking for you, like literally your brand, your name. And then if you have like some very specific variation on a product, or like a few of those search terms that map to that, make sure you have a page for that. But otherwise, with the amount of effort it takes to put to get a bunch of content up and to get links to it and to get authority to it, you could probably be doing a lot more rapid feedback in other channels. So it's not that they shouldn't do SEO necessarily, but when you're trying to keep a company alive in the early stage, it's just not the best use of resources and time, which are limited.
So what are you saying, that they should be doing paid PPC?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's usually a better place to start, like different types of paid, because you get rapid feedback of, okay, here's when people buy, here's when they don't. I mean, some companies are able to get by without paid, and I mean, I've definitely made a living telling people that they shouldn't rely exclusively on paid, but it's very good for some things, and you get rapid feedback. You can get results. There's ways to be on, as I've heard it called, the AdWords crack pipe, and you don't want to be stuck on that crack pipe too bad. But I think it makes sense to attack SEO when you have a firm understanding of like where the opportunity is and what the result can be.
It's funny that you say that because I've had this conversation about what channels to start in so many times, and everybody seems to have a different opinion about it. Everybody seems to have a different experience with it. Mm-hmm. I've talked to a few startup founders who said that they were able to grow because they didn't have a budget at the beginning, so they couldn't spend it on ads. So they built their entire marketing department based on content. And now it's because of that content that they are in such a good position. And when I say content, I guess you probably do you differentiate SEO and content? I
mean, I think SEO is a distribution channel. Content is the asset that's being distributed.
Yeah, for sure. So
yeah, but that's different. So one thing I was talking to an early stage founder in the email marketing space or something. And he was talking about doing SEO, and I said, look, there's probably like your foundational SEO would be make sure you could be found, make sure you're like a whatever CRM for very specific thing. Like maybe try to get found for that, but if you're actually trying to learn what your customers are and educate new users, you need content. And in that way, your initial content efforts are really more for solidifying your product market fit, being good for people within the funnel, sending to people on your email list. And then, like those are assets where SEO becomes a distribution channel long term. But so I'm very supportive of doing content in that way. But if you do it for like the sake of let's build up a machine to create SEO content when like you haven't figured other stuff out, I think it's usually SEO is a byproduct of doing content for other reasons.
Yeah, no, it's true and it makes sense. And I'm so what you're saying is make sure people find you. That's basically just taking a bottom of the funnel approach first, right? Just
do the basics. Just do the basics. Don't screw it up.
But there are some companies, some brands that start that they aren't new, but maybe they're new in terms of domain authority, website. I don't know. They're new on the digital scene, but maybe they've been around for a long time in another capacity. Would you take the same approach?
Probably not. It all depends where the company is in terms of development. Like, I just completely lost my train of thought.
That's okay, it happens. But basically, where the company is in terms of development, in terms of its product or in terms of its marketing maturity?
Yeah, probably marketing maturity. So it really depends if is this stuff, are these assets going to be useful in another capacity, or is there enough room to grow here that it justifies it? And that's the thing. A lot of people, they think about getting into SEO before actually understanding what the ROI is. And that doesn't mean that you have to map everything exactly, but you should be able to say, here's approximately the amount of traffic we can drive, and then here's approximately like what we think the conversion and revenue will be. And those don't have to be exact, but if it's like not in the ballpark for it to be worth it, then that's very telling right there.
So if for you, a company that's ready to start SEO, growth SEO, they already have tested their keywords. They know that people are responding. Like if they could just get traffic, they will get conversions. Is there anything else that they need to have?
I think the most important thing is product market fit. So basically you know that if you get the right users in a good enough quantity and you can have the right funnel underneath it, that it will convert. That's one thing. What was the other thing? What did you say?
Product market fit. Basically, if you get traffic, it will convert.
Yeah. It's very helpful to have paid keyword data. You don't necessarily need that, but it can increase your level of confidence. Like, okay, we know that when we drive paid keywords, that it converts, therefore our confidence that the organic will convert will be higher. But I don't think you necessarily need that, and you also can't map paid conversion rates onto organic. It's more about just seeing directionally, hey, we know when we drive people to the site for relevant topics that we can get them to convert, and we hypothesize that we can scale that.
Mm-hmm. What's your opinion on how Google Ads affects SEO?
I think it's more indirect. Like I hear plenty of either conspiracy theories or quasi data driven explanations of as to how something happens. I see the main impact being that if you decrease your non-brand search, then it's going to bring fewer people like organic down the funnel. So for example, if you're doing a bunch of non-brand paid search and then people come back and they convert on brand, or they come back to read some of your content, but likely it's brand, then what you'll often see is a slight decrease in brand search, because there's basically fewer people. If paid was actually making people aware of you, and then they were visiting with organic later, that will drop. But otherwise, there's like some mild correlation, but I try to only like get insights from that and not be too preoccupied with it.
Yeah, I don't know if it has an effect. I know that there are some SEOs who are like, you can't be an SEO unless you know Google AdWords, unless you know how to run a campaign on Google Ads, which I feel like they're pretty different.
I mean, I don't know how to run a campaign in Google Ads, and I'm very confident that like I've driven millions of dollars in revenue for companies, so like I think I can personally dispute that. Having said that, it's very helpful to be cross-disciplinary. And actually one of the lessons I've learned on my own team is I'm trying to hire people who have experience in different channels, because otherwise you get this sort of skewed version of the world of this is SEO and organic and here's what paid is and here's how events roll up into that and PR and other things, when like really if that isn't our focus, then and it's more ancillary, then we don't have direct experience in that. So despite the shade I just threw at that notion, I think it's like incredibly helpful, and some of the best practitioners of any kind that I know have deep experience in something else, and it gives them a unique perspective.
Yeah, it for sure is nice to have experience elsewhere. Like I was saying before, sometimes if you've been on a project for too long, or in a channel for too long, or on a client for too long, you get your nose kind of buried in it, and you fail to see other things that could connect and maybe improve it. And it's nice to have an outsider perspective.
Yeah. Are you familiar with, I think it's called the Einstellung effect?
No.
Where your previous approach to solving a problem blinds you to different solutions to it.
Okay.
It's applicable to a bunch of things, but I think especially with client work, like one of the most valuable times when you're an outside entity and you're working with a company is when you step in and you can ask some WTF questions. Like, wait, you're doing this? Why? Like, does this make sense? Whatever. But then over time, you sort of get like, you ingest enough of the propaganda and you start to take a bunch of things for granted that you lose that. So one thing we try to do is have quarterly reviews where we'll go back and see like, okay, let's try to undo all of our assumptions. What could we do? And then we're not as good about this as we'd like to be, but when we've had virtual offsites with my team, we'll sort of have like a client project day where we'll break up into teams and we'll get a group of people together to work on a couple clients who they don't normally work with, but then give them enough context about it so that we can try to get like a fresh perspective on things. We've actually had cool projects come from that.
Okay. That's pretty cool. I like that. And in the quarterly review, you're doing that internally with your team.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you're saying we're going this whole quarter, we're going to try to focus on these kind of bottom of the funnel keywords or these very high volume keywords, and do it in this manner, and then you say, actually, let's do the opposite of that next quarter and see what happens.
Yeah, more or less. I mean, it's sort of like trying to set a strategic direction, but then also make an explicit attempt to question our assumptions about it. So, like, if we said, again, one of the fallacies you can fall into, I think, is you're the expert, you say something should work, and then you're incentivized through sunk costs to basically be like, oh no, like it'll work, it's fine, it's gonna work, whatever. So basically being able to look at it and be like, is this not working? Like, why is it not working? Should we try something else? Because ultimately, this is a black box. We don't know what will work for certain. We're making hypotheses. It's just about varying degrees of confidence.
I mean, it's hard to do that on a quarterly basis. SEO moves, like, by the end of the quarter, maybe starts. I guess it depends on what you're doing. Sometimes you can see things move a little faster, but can you declare that something wasn't working in one quarter?
No, but reviewing everything quarterly doesn't mean you only review the last quarter.
That's
so it
true.
can just be like sort of looking at our projects, and I think we have a lot of room to improve this, but the intent is to look back at our projects, even if it's with a client we were working with for a year, and say, okay, like, let's check in on these. How is this doing? Is there any assumption we were making before that we either have reason to question or has basically been disproven.
Yeah.
Or the opposite, something that, hey, this worked, why are we not doing more of it?
Yeah. Touche. I feel like I have a lot to chew on. Every time I record one of these, I regret not having a notebook with me. Luckily, I'm recording it, so.
Yeah, I hear there will be evidence of.
There will be evidence of this conversation, and I always feel like I'm learning a lot from the person that I'm talking to, and in this case from you. But I feel like every time I talk to you, I learn a lot about operations SEO and a lot of different things. So, thank you for chatting with me.
Yeah, thank you for the kind words. And yeah, this has been fun. And I've also one thing, it's kind of easy to not talk to people who do similar things. And I mean, like you just said, like that you've learned things from me, blah blah. But like you've like said offhand things that have inspired me to be, oh, like maybe we should try this, or maybe we should do this differently. And I find like I've actually tried to make a point to talk to other people who are in a similar position to me, both for like a practical learnings and then also a sanity perspective.
Yeah,
like, oh, like that's tough for you too. Okay, it's not just me. That's good to know.
It helps a lot. Honestly, in building this agency, if I hadn't been connected with other agency owners, it would have been so much harder. I really appreciate, and not just agency owners, but business owners in general, but agency owners, you know, we work with clients, like offer this service. So it helps a lot to constantly talk with people. That's why I do make a point of meeting with somebody on a weekly basis. It's not just for recording content. But yeah, thank you. So if people want to connect with you and learn more from your wisdom, where's the best place to do that?
I guess find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, on
I'm pretty
LinkedIn.
bad at social media.
That's how we connected, actually.
That is.
On LinkedIn, yeah.
Oh, you're in Barcelona. This says content. What's up? And here we are.
Here we are. Well, thank you guys for listening. Or watching. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. If you did, as always, share it with a friend or colleague, give it a like, and connect with my friend Nigel here.
Ciao.
Ciao.